This is not breaking news. This is not a scandal. This is not about one person. This is about a system that was designed to work quietly and only works if everyone agrees to stop at the same red light. Early this morning, a single piece of paper crossed a threshold. And when it did, the United States entered a condition it has never fully tested. Not chaos yet. Something colder than that. 2 claims to authority. Both legal, both constitutional, neither enforceable on their own. Most of the time, power in this country is invisible. It flows because everyone pretends not to notice it. But when that flow is interrupted, when the current splits, what's revealed is not strength. It's dependence on obedience, on recognition, on belief. If you want to understand what happens next, you can't look for villains. You have to look at the wiring. Stay with me. Because once this kind of fracture appears, it doesn't announce where it ends. Here is the uncomfortable truth. The system is no longer controlled by elections or speeches or even laws in the way we like to imagine them. It is controlled by recognition. Who do you answer the phone for? Whose name you put at the top of the memo? Which signature you treat as real? In moments like this, power doesn't move through institutions. It moves through people, through habits, through muscle memory. For decades, we told ourselves the Constitution was self-executing, that once the words were written, the outcome would follow. But the document doesn't enforce itself. It never has. There is no master switch, no referee who blows the whistle and clears the field. Instead, there is a pause, a collective intake of breath, and during that pause, the system waits to see who blinks first. That hesitation is not a bug. It is the mechanism. And once you see that, the question changes. Not who is right, but who will be obeyed. And that is where this begins to accelerate. For most of modern American history, transfer of power was loud but brief. Election night, inauguration day, a visible handoff. What changed was not the Constitution. What changed was the time in between. Slowly, quietly, we normalized delay. Contested results, prolonged transitions, legal challenges treated as routine, not exceptional. Before, uncertainty lasted hours, then days, then weeks. And each time it happened, nothing collapsed. So the system learned the wrong lesson. It learned that ambiguity was survivable. But ambiguity compounds, because every delay trains institutions to improvise, to wait, to hedge, to prepare for more than one outcome at once. That is the silent shift. Not toward instability, toward dual readiness. When 2 futures are treated as plausible, neither is fully enforced. And enforcement is the only thing that turns authority into power. This didn't begin today. Today is just the first time the overlap became visible. And once overlap exists at the top, it doesn't stay there. It seeps downward, into agencies, into commands, into decisions that can't be postponed. That's when delay stops being passive and starts becoming dangerous. There is a moment in every systemic failure where the signal breaks through the noise, not the loudest moment, the clearest one. It arrives as a shock, but it isn't the story. It's the symptom. Because once authority is split, the first thing that fails is not policy. It's coordination. Orders still get written, phones still ring, meetings still happen, but behind every action is a new, unspoken question. Is this instruction real or provisional? You can see it in the pauses, in the delays that suddenly need justification, in the way decisions start to carry footnotes. This is where the system reveals what it was never designed to handle, a dispute not over outcomes, but over who decides. Nothing dramatic has to happen yet. No tanks, no sirens, just hesitation, just enough friction to slow everything down. That's why this moment matters, because the longer that hesitation lasts, the more pressure builds elsewhere. And pressure never stays abstract for long. It moves, it searches, and it finds the weakest point next. Here is how the system actually absorbs damage. When authority fractures at the top, it does not shatter evenly. It redistributes. The people closest to the decision do not pay the price first. They rarely do. Instead, risk is pushed downward, onto layers designed to execute, not interpret. Onto officials trained to follow instructions, not arbitrate legitimacy. They are forced into a role they were never meant to occupy. Not decision makers, but filters. Every order now carries a hidden cost, not just what it does, but what it signals. Obedience becomes a statement. So does refusal. And once compliance is politicized, the system starts keeping score. Who answered? Who hesitated? Who asked for clarification? That is how loyalty replaces law. Not all at once, increment by increment. The structure still looks intact from the outside. Buildings stand, titles remain. But internally, the load paths have changed. Stress moves through places never reinforced to carry it. That is why these moments don't explode immediately. They bend. And bent systems fail later, not sooner. Which is exactly what makes the next phase harder to contain. This is where the pace changes. Because systems under strain don't warn. They accelerate. Decisions that once took days now demand minutes. Clarifications are skipped. Assumptions harden. People stop asking if an order is valid. They ask how risky it is to question it. That calculation happens fast, and it happens everywhere at once. Silence becomes interpreted as consent. Delay becomes defiance. Routine actions start to feel irreversible. Nothing here requires bad actors, only uncertainty under time pressure. That's how escalation works in real life. Not with speeches, with deadlines. And once momentum takes over, the system stops checking itself. It just moves. Forward, sideways, anywhere but still. This is the phase where mistakes stop being correctable, where reversibility quietly disappears. Because by the time anyone agrees on who is in charge, the consequences of acting without agreement are already locked in. And that's the moment everyone fears. Right before control slips, but after commitment has begun. This is where it stops being abstract, because while institutions hesitate, you don't get that luxury. If you work inside the system, this lands on your desk as an instruction with no context, a directive that assumes certainty you don't feel. If you live outside it, the effects arrive indirectly. Services slow, markets jitter, signals conflict. You notice it not as a crisis, but as friction, appointments postponed, decisions deferred, answers that suddenly come with disclaimers. This is what instability looks like when it's still legal, when nothing has happened yet, and it forces a quiet psychological shift. Trust erodes not because of one act, but because consistency disappears. You start planning around uncertainty, saving differently, waiting longer, listening more carefully to tone than to content. That adaptation feels rational. It is. But it also feeds the system that caused it. Because the more people hedge, the more ambiguity becomes normalized. That's the human cost, not panic, adjustment. And adjustment, once widespread, is hard to reverse. Because it prepares everyone for what comes next. What happens next doesn't stay contained. Because systems like this don't exist in isolation. They are watched closely. Allies don't panic first. They pause. They wait to see which channel answers, which voice speaks without being corrected. Markets do the same thing, so do adversaries. Uncertainty is not interpreted as neutrality. It's interpreted as opportunity. Every unresolved question at the center creates echoes outward. Hesitation becomes data. Silence becomes signal. This is how a domestic fracture becomes a global variable, not through declarations. Through recalculation, timelines adjust, assumptions are rewritten, contingencies move from theoretical to active. And the most destabilizing part is this: nothing has to be wrong yet. No misstep, no violation, just the knowledge that command is contested, that decisions might be reversible, that commitments might not hold. In international systems, reliability is power. And when reliability blurs, pressure fills the gap. Not all at once, but steadily. Which is why the question stops being how this resolves here and starts becoming how much motion it creates elsewhere. From here, the future doesn't collapse into one outcome. It fans out. There are three paths, all of them plausible, none of them clean. The first is adjustment. The system absorbs the fracture. Institutions quietly align. Recognition consolidates. The crisis ends without ceremony. On paper, everything works, but something fundamental shifts. A precedent is set. Power learns it can pause reality without consequence. The second path is erosion. Nothing breaks outright, but ambiguity lingers. Every future decision carries the memory of this moment. Authority weakens by reference. Compliance becomes conditional. The system still functions, just thinner, more brittle, more dependent on personalities. The third path is rupture, not instantly, not theatrically, but through a single irreversible action taken under contested authority, an order obeyed by some and rejected by others. That's when law stops being the arena and force begins to negotiate. Which path emerges doesn't depend on ideology, it depends on timing, on hesitation, on whether alignment happens before momentum hardens. And the most unsettling part is this: all three futures can begin the same way. You don't know which one you're on until turning back is no longer an option. This is the part people want to skip, the waiting. Because uncertainty feels passive. It isn't. Moments like this don't announce their verdicts. They accumulate them, quietly, through small acts of recognition and refusal. Nothing here requires drama to be dangerous. All it requires is memory. Systems remember what they survive. They remember what was tolerated. They remember how close the line came to breaking and whether anything happened afterward. That memory doesn't disappear when the crisis ends. It gets stored, referenced, used later. So if you're looking for reassurance, you won't find it here. Not because collapse is inevitable, but because repetition is. The real question isn't whether this moment passes. It's what it teaches the system about itself. If authority can split once and hold, it can split again, faster, under less pressure. That's the unresolved danger. Not today, not this incident, but the next one, and the one after that. Stay with this. Follow what consolidates, watch what gets normalized, because the most important signal won't be the crisis itself. It will be how quickly everyone stops talking about it. That's where the story continues.